So the idea that you have created that is a constitutional republic, this type of idea we find to be very supportive for humans and for your dynamics on Earth, more so than many of the other systems that have been introduced to humanity over the generations. So it is important that governmental systems encourage individual freedoms and liberties and encourage the individual to feel empowered and to be able to create a life for themselves that is enjoyable, that is good, and that is prosperous. Because if the individual can achieve that, that means the society can achieve that, and all people can be great. That is what we advise for governmental roles. The government ought to support the individual, support their freedoms, and should preserve and protect their freedoms. You see, these are key things. We had this type of dynamic on my home world. Now, keep in mind, it was not called a constitutional republic necessarily. How that governmental organization manifested was very different, and we would not call it a government. Remember what government means in Latin: to control the mind. Government means mind control. So it was not government we had. We did not have a need for government. We were in control of our own minds, you see. We didn't need an external authority to control us, so we did not have a government. Yet, we had organizers that helped to inform, that helped to guide, and that helped to realign individuals in situations if they became misaligned. You have a very similar thing on Earth, but the way you go about that on Earth oftentimes is very different than how we went about it. Many of you make corrections of that which is incorrect through your criminal justice system specifically. That doesn't necessarily lead to actual corrections, even if you call them correctional facilities. Usually it leads to more issues for more people. Whilst those at the higher levels are able to line their pockets. Of course, the inverse is also an issue. So we still had members of our society who made those types of corrective roles, but that did not necessarily involve imprisonments. It did not involve the same types of things you have on Earth. So the way we organized had certain similar characteristics and themes as to what your human governments have created. But what we have on my home world and what we had in those days on my home world was not necessarily a government. It didn't necessarily have a criminal justice system. It didn't necessarily have a military. It was very different, but nevertheless, it was a system of organization that encouraged creativity and expansion, not necessarily a system of control, which implies a system of excessive limit. Ours was not a system of limit. Ours involved the creation of some limitation, but ultimately all limits imposed were designed to encourage expansion, and that's what they did. For example, at a certain age, members of the society would be presented with different options of exploration based on their own skill sets, based on their DNA, you could say, superpowers. Certain paths would be presented to them when they were ready. That's a type of limitation meant to lead to expansion. So we had a system of organization, but it operated primarily as a council. Members of my own species were not the only members of the council. Greys were a part of the council. The beings of Sirius were a part of the council. We had manted beings a part of the council. From time to time, when we would form deep relationships with other civilizations, they may actually have a type of honorary seat on the council. So that is how we organized prior to the telepathic connection. But keep in mind, just through surrounding ourselves with some of these beings, the telepathic connection was blossoming and growing. And of course, this type of council still exists, but its role is very different now because the telepathic network is complete. Therefore, the council's role is really a role of guidance, a role of assistance. They help to make sure the synchronicities flow in the ways that allow for my species to grow.